This channel is for mature audiences only. If you're underage on this channel, your parents' mom should have swallowed them or spit them out.
And this is Tico, Tren, Red Pill, and this video is going to be a reaction video to something that happened last night during or around the same time as the debates were taking place. That a lot of people skipped over or tend to like avoid or avoid talking about on the news for all intents and purposes that was actually going on during this. Um, you know the title. The only reason why I'm bringing this up because uh, I would have missed it if it wasn't for my daughters. To be honest with you, my two oldest daughters, Kieran and Deshari. So typically, how it works is apparently the first group to actually react to this whole entire COVID shutdown is the Jewish community, and it's the Orthodox. It's the Orthodox Jews for all intents and purposes. Um, the funny thing about that is they're already trying to paint them as extremists already by calling them ultra Orthodox Jews, which is actually pretty funny. They're just Orthodox Jewish people. They're not ultra Orthodox Jews. They're basically the left is already trying to paint a narrative and spin a narrative on them being terrorists already, when in fact they're basically exercising their rights in religion, freedom of religion for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is the left is already trying to paint them as a terrorist organization by calling them ultra Orthodox. Is basically how the media is actually painting these guys, which really sucks once you think about it. At the end of the day, it's one of those things where it's like you have to literally think about it, understand it, and then move on and work your way from there. And typically, how this works is the media needs a narrative first, so they can paint them in a bad light. Then second, they basically need the rest of the people to get on board by treating them this way. This whole entire the way they talk about it and the way they're actually treating us kind of sort of reminds me of Nazi Germany, which really sucks. And this is happening in New York right now, with the new round of restrictions that Mr. Cuomo is actually laying out on people. The new round of restrictions that Mr. Cuomo is laying out on people right now as we speak, which is actually pretty funny. And this is actually happening. And the sad part about that, I expected other groups to actually rise up. Well, actually, I expected this group to actually rise up first because typically, if any group is going to say something or have a problem with something, typically it's always going to be this group. Then it's going to be other groups after it because typically Jewish people always lead and everybody tends to follow for all intents and purposes. It's typically how this should work. So now that the Jewish people have spoken, now it's time for everybody else, all the other minorities and all the other people to actually stand up and actually start speaking and actually get some courage and bravery to go against this bullshit for all intents and purposes. Because quite frankly, I believe the fact that the only reason why the left did this is because they all were waving Trump flags for all intents and purposes during this whole entire thing. So it's one of those things where like, oh, well, obviously they're terrorists because Trump flags, Trump this, Trump support Trump this. So basically they've already started painting them as ultra Orthodox Jewish people, which really sucks. It's like, no, they're just Orthodox Jews, and you're stepping on what they're believing. So you kind of sort of deserve the outcome to this. But that's enough of me talking, and I'm gonna play this video, and I'm gonna react to it as it keeps on going for all intents and purposes. This is going to be on my Tico Tren race and gender relations channel, and this is going to be on the Red Pill Black Pill channel. I mean the Black Pill Red Pill Radio channel. Alrighty then, let's get this started. Let me make sure before I do this that I put the sound on. Did I put the sound on for this? Yep, the sound's on. Okay, cool. Alrighty then, let's do this.
So what safety precautions should people take? What do you advise?
Well, nothing really. I mean, if you want to wear the masks, you can wear the masks. Right. I have a guy who works in the funeral home with masks. People have died. And I'm telling you, I, as you can see from all my videos, I don't wear the masks. If I go into a store, I respect the store. I respect people, and you can do that. You want to stay 6 feet away, stay 6 feet away. If somebody asks you to stay away from them, you stay away from them. You respect another person, except if it's Cuomo and de Blasio. They're not people. Again, Pete Cuomo and idiot de Blasio. Mr. de Blasio, I'm coming for you. I'm not going to beat you up because you're an idiot, but I'm telling you one day you're going to get it. We come from the fight. Our grandparents were in the fight. They tortured us. They beat us. They killed us. My family was wiped out. If you think that I'm going to let this happen again to my community that I've worked here for 35 years, I promise you.
And the thing, once you think about it, it's one of those things where like it's kind of sad to think about it like that. If you're one of those groups of people that's been like snuffed out in the past, and now you're facing this again with the whole entire lockdowns and stipulations, and now you got cops, rounding you up and shit like that. Because the sad part about that, I don't know if it shows it in this video, but apparently there's a scene where they had like cops in full rag gear, literally like beating them up, hustling them off the street, and like throw them in the back of paddy wagons. Kids, children, everybody basically was catching it. There's another video. If I find it before the stream's over, I'll play it too.
Nobody wants to see. I don't know how to see. Can we be in the street, officer, or no? I gotta get these cars off the lot. Everybody off the street. Let's go off the streets, man. Cars off the What time is my show on national television? Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock. Say it. Wednesday night. Nobody knows what my show is. We are here today. We are doing a civil disobedience protest, and we're going to start doing this every day. I'm just going to give a message to you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Cuomo. We beat you in court. Where court order still stands. I'm just telling you right now. Whatever he just told us to do, that our schools and synagogues are closed, he's in contempt of court. We are now filing a new injunction. I know what your name is, young lady, but we're filing a new injunction. I'm going to have it up and running in about 2 or 3 days. We are going to then finish his appeal. He tried to appeal. We actually won. Not only the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims. And we have that our school.
That's interesting. They didn't just appeal for themselves. They appealed for the Christians and the Muslims. So they weren't selfish about this shit, and they actually did it for both the Christians and the Muslims. Let that shit sink in. Let that shit swirl around in your head. And that's the cold hard truth. Like they're not even just thinking about themselves. They're thinking about all the other religions, all the other 3 major religions too, in the process of doing this. Like, so it's one of those things where you have to sit there and think to yourself, where are the Christians at for this? Where are the Muslims at for this? Why are the Jewish standing out front in front for both those groups in the first stand place? Like, you got to really think about this stuff. The Christians are starting to get like weak legs and are starting to like, crumble under pressure. And none of the Christian leaders really want to do anything about it. They make big noise on the news talk about we're going to have this service no matter what. But the sad part about that is a lot of times they end up not having that service, or they end up like capitulating to the government, just like they did when it came to like their stance against gay marriage, that they're not going to marry gay people at the church. What did the government go and do? They basically told them that, well, we're going to take away your protection under non-profit organization if you're not going to marry gay people. So what did they do? they started marrying gay people at the church. So the sad part about that, the church is actually starting to bend and flex and break, basically under the pressure of government and the new social, not so norms for that's all intents and purposes, are the social norms, depending on what you want to call it. I call it the new social norms that everybody's being placed under for all intents and purposes. Let it be all this stuff and let it be everybody's opinion and everybody's feelings that everybody's got to respect now, because nobody actually pays attention to facts anymore. They all pay attention to feelings, which is actually really sad. But I'll continue this.
Schools, our synagogues, everything could be open, and 50%. We, and according to the First Amendment, maybe people don't understand this, the Constitution overrides everything. So, Mr. President, I know you're better now. Please come and help us. But we will not listen to you, Governor. Mr. Mayor, if you hurt my people, I'm holding you responsible. I'm warning you. Anybody gets hurt, God forbid somebody dies, I am going to personally sue you every single dollar I have, young lady.
So the Jewish people are ready to go to war they're ready to take it to war to the courtrooms, basically. So it's one of those things where, like, you got to think to yourself, are you willing to do the same and follow them? Or you want to just complain about them being able to do this? And it's typically one of those things. And the sad part about that is nobody really can stand up against this community. I mean, you can. I mean, there can, but, you know, it'd be very reminiscent of World War II if you're dead type thing. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you're willing to actually sacrifice how you look on national TV to do some stupid shit to this community, at the end of the day, you'll look like a monster, or you'll look like a monster, basically. This is typically one of the many reasons why that one college was passing around a petition so they can be able to identify as black. A bunch of white women wanted to be able to identify as black, so, you know, they can have the black shield just in case, you know, black people say that's racist to them. Because typically a lot of SJWs and a lot of feminist organizations typically say that, you know, they're not racist when they actually turn around and say some racist shit out their mouths, which is actually pretty funny.
My name is Heshi Tischler. I'm running for city council, and I'm going to have enough city councilmen that anybody who gets a fine, anybody, Bronx, Queens, Manhattan, Staten Island, don't pay your fines.
Donald Trump! Donald Trump!
Look at that. Even the kids are ready to vote for Donald Trump, and they're not even old enough to vote. That's some gangster shit right there. That is some real gangster shit.
Donald Trump! Donald Trump!
You get a fine, do not pay it. When I get into the city council, my first piece of legislation is going to wipe out and give amnesty to anybody that got a fine during this time. That's the first bill. And then, of course, we're going to defund the Department of Buildings, Department of Health. We're going to have to fire everybody. HPD, I like some of them. And, of course, sanitation. They're all garbage. You're all gone, boys, except for the workers. I do like them. So we're going to combine them, and I'm going to save you in my budget over $1.7 billion when I combine these agencies.
I believe it. He's Jewish. I believe it. I'm not in New York. I'm about to move to New York so I can vote for him. City council. Legit.
I'll show you how it's run correctly.
Matter of fact, let me text Cartel Princess right now. We're moving to New York. So voting for that man.
We're not going to close it. Where are they? They're here? Where are they?
No. It shows that this is Nazi Germany. And they can't arrest all of us. And if they do arrest...
Remember that hunk if you support protest that was going on for the troops? Hunk if you support the troops? That's basically hunk if you support the community. Let me try to find that other video. If I can't find it, I'll play it off my phone. so I won't get any copyright strikes. Matter of fact, there's another video here where they were actually talking about something else, and they were actually being arrested in the news. The news actually reported it. Let me stop sharing this so I can actually close this down and look for this shit. Oh, this is where they burned the mask in the middle of the road. I actually like this. This was actually very cute. I think this is where they burned the mask. Because the sad part about that is I find it very odd that it's their portion of town. It's their portion of town that's the one that's, the quote unquote hot zone that I've always found funny.
Millionaires have already been made here this season.
I find it very odd that it's their zone.
Of protests erupting in Borough Park. Demonstrators in the Brooklyn neighborhood are against Governor Cuomo's new restriction on schools, non-essential businesses, and houses of worship after an uptick in COVID cases in parts of Brooklyn and Queens.
The holiday is 2 more days, and he's closing it right before these 2 days.
Hundreds in the predominantly Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods saying they're being singled out and will continue to pray together in large groups despite the state mandate.
The sad part about that is the hot zone is exactly where they are. If you look at the hot zone, the quote unquote hot zone that Cuomo painted out is exactly where the Jewish Orthodox people are, which is actually pretty ironic or pretty odd that he made it where they are, not where anybody else is, not where the Muslims are, not where the Christians are, not where the Latinos are, not where the Jamaicans are, where the Jewish people are. So in a way, it's kind of one of those things where they kind of sort of exacerbated the situation by doing what they did. Because the sad part about that, they knew that Jewish celebration was coming up. So they then went on to actually restrict them for various reasons, basically, because Cuomo.
To restrict religious gatherings in city hotspots.
See, and that was exactly where they were, was the red part. Like, let that just sink in. There's not too many other groups in that red spot, but that group of people, which is actually pretty funny. And once you actually think about it, it's like, you're sitting there looking at it like, yeah, even as a black person, I'm sitting there looking like, yeah, that's a tad bit racist, pimping. That's just a tad bit racist. Like, I literally have to give it to the Jewish people on this one. Like, it's like, yeah, no, that's a tad bit racist. I'm sorry. Like, Cuomo, that's a tad bit racist.
A journalist for the Jewish Insider covering the protests alleges he was brutally attacked by a crowd calling him a Nazi and Hitler. Multiple fires were lit on the street and dozens of...
And the sad part about that, what they don't tell you is the fires that were lit on the street were all of masks. All the masks that got shipped into the community, they decided to burn them in the middle of the street. So they're burning masks. They're not burning like anything else ridiculous. They're burning a bunch of masks.
Demonstrators were seen without masks.
Most of the people in this neighborhood, is it legal just to come into certain neighborhoods and say you can't pray, you can't hold your services?
This former New York State Assemblyman has long ties to the Borough Park community and condemns the violence.
The overall thing, attacking people, putting people in the hospital, it is unconscionable. It is a horror.
Well, the sad part about that, they actually paid this guy. Apparently, they paid this guy to actually say this stuff. And the sad part about that, they're only setting fire to masks. They're not really attacking anybody. And a person that would claim that he was attacked, I'll show you a picture of this guy later. The person that claimed he was attacked basically was a plant, basically saying that he was attacked. He was not even attacked. He's basically just trying to make the community look bad. This is what I said at the beginning of this thing when I said they referred to him as ultra-Orthodox Jews. You see, they're already trying to actually paint them off as terrorists, basically, in the beginning of this. And that's typically what I said at the beginning of this one, when I said they're trying to paint them as ultra-Orthodox Jews, basically, instead of just regular Orthodox Jews. And the sad part about that is, it is what it is. And it's one of those things where, like, you're trying to bitch slap a community and you got everybody else to capitulate, but you can't get the Jewish people to capitulate. Now you want to paint them in a negative light so you can paint them like ISIS or something like that, or paint them in the same light as everything else. And the sad part about that is, once I dug into the story a lot more, come to find out the police actually did more abusing than the actual Jewish people. So the police were overstepping their boundaries on what they can and cannot do civilly to these people. So at the end of the day, no, they didn't attack anybody. The police attacked them, along with the fire department and the paramedics and all those other great people.
It is disgusting, and I hope that those responsible for attacking anyone last night will.
Yeah, the sad part about that is he can't even depict who actually attacked who, but the sad part about that is the cops attacked them. But we're not talking about that, and he's trying to sweep over it and make it seem like it was nothing, basically. And I actually did the investigation, and there was like really no. The sad part about that, there was no Jewish people arrested, but there were some cops that had to be on desk duty or be on retirement for a little bit until they do some investigations. But there was zero Jewish people actually arrested yesterday.
Will be arrested.
All of this comes as Governor Andrew Cuomo amended Mayor Bill de Blasio's initial zip code-based plan with.
See, look at that shit.
Red hot zones for mandatory closures, limiting houses of worship to 10 attendees at a time, which he says is for the safety of all New Yorkers. Those who live in orange warning zones and yellow precautionary zones have less restrictions.
Some people are on.
The sad part about that is the people in the most restricted zones are either Jewish people and another community that's actually ultra religious community also, which is actually in that hot zone as well too. So it's the Orthodox Jews in another group. I forgot who they were. I don't want to butcher their name because it's because I don't want to butcher their name, but I have to go back and look at that when I look at that later. But it's typically a very religious community that lives in both of those hot zones. It's funny how in the yellow zones and the other zones, it's perfectly fine for you to do what you want to do, but in the red zones, you got a hole. Like, let that shit sink in. Everybody in the yellow zones is fine. Everybody in the orange zones is fine. But everybody in the red zone, you got to follow directions. I love that.
Unhappy?
Here goes this retarded motherfucker right here talking.
I understand it. These limitations are better than going back to close down.
You technically did put them back in close down. Because the sad part about that, you put them back in the same predicament that they were in the beginning. It is what it is.
And we did reach out to the NYPD this morning, and despite that footage that you just saw, despite what several journalists have experienced in that neighborhood in Brooklyn, the NYPD says there have not been any arrests or...
Told you. Shut the fuck up. Nobody did any fucking thing.
No destruction.
See, and the sad part about that, they're basically trying to paint them as they're basically trying to paint them as terrorists, basically. And the NYPD said there's been no arrest for this reason, basically, because there's no point in arresting people if they didn't do anything wrong. Like, that'd be like saying, well, we just arrested them because. No, you don't do that.
Arrests or no destruction of property.
See, there was no arrest and no destruction of property. They've already admitted that there's no arrest and no destruction of property. What they were burning was masks. They were burning masks. That's it. And they're trying to make them sound like they're like ISIS, basically, out there in New York, which is actually pretty funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it's sad and it's ridiculous. Like if you're going to make somebody, if you're actually going to do some actual, condemning, actually condemn some actual groups that actually did some shit wrong, like, I don't know, BLM, SJWs, Antifa, people like that, basically. And it's typically what it is. And it's like, what is the point of keeping these motherfuckers around if they're going to do all the shit, but you want to point the finger at other people, like the Orthodox Jewish people, and other people? It's like, come on now, guys. It's not that serious. Now you're reaching now. You're trying to reach on a conservative community, basically, and you're reaching on a wrong conservative community when you're doing this shit. And it's typically how it works. You're literally reaching on the wrong conservative community. You had a better chance of fucking with regular white ass men, basically, or you have a better chance of fucking with conservative black people than you do have a chance of fucking with conservative Jewish people. Like, let's just keep it 100. You're fucking with the right group of people. You're literally fucking with the right group of people about doing this shit.
Of course, we will continue to check in with them all morning long. But in the meantime, many city leaders here in Brooklyn say those protests and what's happening there in Brooklyn is not a reflection of the borough. We're live in Brooklyn this morning. Jennifer Bisram, Pix 11 News.
Now the borough's trying to separate. Now the borough's trying to separate themselves from them too. That's some funny shit. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it makes it kind of interesting when you got to deal with shit like this, and you wonder what you wonder what the hell's on people's minds when they do this shit for all intents and purposes, and it's very interesting. And trust me, you don't gotta avoid New York. You're fine. You're perfectly fine. They're letting traffic through. MGTOW to win. The Jewish community is not doing anything wrong. They're letting traffic through, and they're moving out the way when traffic gets too ridiculous, basically, and they're letting people through. Now the things you do have to worry about is Antifa and all those other motherfuckers, basically. But the Jewish community is pretty fine. And if you notice, there was no Antifa people there because they know what they can and cannot do, and what they're willing not to do, basically. Because if you're going to call yourself anti-fascist, what you ain't finna do is go fuck with a bunch of Jewish people, like a bunch of smart people. Because Antifa acts stupid all the damn time. I mean, Antifa acts crazy all the time, but Antifa's not stupid. They know what they can and cannot do. They know what they can. They know who and when they can. They know who and who not they can fuck with, basically, when it comes down to it. It's pretty much how it works. So it's one of those things where you got to understand your enemy, basically, which is Antifa. You got to understand your enemy and understand what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. They're willing to fuck with black people and beat up black people. They do it quite often. Oh, they fucked up one black person not too long ago and tried to blame it on the Proud Boys. Sad part about that guy was a part of the Proud Boys. They literally jumped him in a parking lot, and the dude had to hobble away. Like, let that shit sink in. Then on top of that, they tried to blame the Proud Boys or the alt-right, basically. Meanwhile, it was Antifa. Another good example of that is, like, they got no problem with beating up black people. Antifa has zero qualms with beating up black people. They have zero qualms with beating up white men, white women, black women, anybody that's not Antifa. They ain't got no problem with doing it to you. However, what they ain't finna do is fuck with the Jewish community, because that would make them look very, very bad. Because if you say you're anti-fascist, then you start fucking with the Jewish community, that actually makes you fascist. You see what I'm saying? So by saying you're Antifa, your title alone lets everybody know that's what you're not finna do. And the minute they do it, that makes them fascist. They drop their anti any fucking thing, and they become fascist. And that's typically how this shit works. Because the cold hard truth about Antifa is they claim they're anti-fascist, but they use fascist tactics. They use fascist tactics to basically silence people. Good example of that is, drawing a parallel, is the secret police that Germany used to have. I'm just saying, if the far leftist government people who want this alternate lifestyle, they would be like the powers to be, and Antifa would be their police force that enforces this shit across all of the United States for all intents and purposes. So technically, what we're seeing is fascist leftists, giving power to a group that calls herself anti-fascist, who uses fascist tactics to basically get their way or get people to capitulate. And the sad part about that is they use more violence than everybody else. They use more violence than any other group of people. And that's the cold hard truth. But, it's anti-fascist, so what's the point? And the sad part about that is, like I said, nobody was arrested. They did rough up a couple people. The cops did rough up a couple people, but nobody was arrested, and no property was destroyed. They were just burning masks. That's all it really was. So that's my video for today. There'll probably be another response video tomorrow, depending on how my day goes and how busy I am. Y'all have a blessed day and be good to yourselves. And always be willing to actually look, learn, and listen, and actually pay attention to actual news and actually do your own investigation on things for all intents and purposes, so you won't have a picture painted for you, and you can paint your own picture for yourself. Because the sad part about that, what news channels ain't going to tell you what's actually happening. They'll only tell you what they want you to hear and what they want you to believe. Like a good example of that is they refer to them as ultra orthodox. Like, dude, you're already trying to paint them as terrorists. It's funny how you want to paint them as terrorists, but you want Antifa to fly under the radar. Yeah, we'll let that roll. But y'all have a blessed day. Be good to yourselves. Treat yourselves like milk. Do not but spoil yourselves, and always be willing to improve yourself and improve upon yourself, and always be willing to listen to make yourself a better version of yourself. Y'all be blessed and have a good one.